experience made me have these assumptions about you. And we talk about that. That's a very difficult conversation to have. That's a very difficult conversation to have. But that is where we begin to go past race as we deal with each other.
Yes.
And we begin to see each other as people. As people. Now, in this sense, and only in this very limited sense, in a colorblind way. But I don't like the idea of us not acknowledging each other's history, each other's race, and diminishing it in any way, because we're afraid to talk about it. And even I'm having this conversation with you, and I'm saying that even the way you're couching things, that you don't really want to you want to be as politically correct as possible, and I guess maybe that's your role, but I see my role to be as to help people to be as totally honest with themselves as possible, to own whatever feelings they do have, and then to be able, because if you don't own it, you can't do anything about it. It's really important that you have the conversation where people are honest with themselves and then honest with the other person, and then make some commitment because of the interaction and then because of the awareness to begin to move past. Because I can tell you, in my life, I have evolved around my areas of discrimination, and sometimes at a very deep level, okay? But only through my own self-work and my self-awareness and my willingness to have real conversations with people about this issue, and not just talk about it in some general sense.
Well, Mr. John, I'm tell you what, I'm glad that we've broken the ice. I think further conversations need to be had. But unfortunately, due to the time factor, we're going to have to pause. I'm not saying we're going to have to end, we're going to have to pause. I'd like to actually widen the discussion, so I'm issuing an open invitation once more, so that we can expand further and perhaps welcome more individuals to this conversation, because I agree, it's something that is long overdue, often spoken about, not acknowledged enough. The conversation, the true conversation, the in-depth conversation is ignored. But I want to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank you for introducing this topic, and let us expand further and deeper. But for now, let's pause there, Sue.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Keep well.
Okay. Bye.
There is going to be a part 2 to this conversation, and perhaps a part 3 and a part 4. As long as we're able to dissect and understand these are the areas that we need to address. Is Trinidad and Tobago a tolerable society? Well, maybe you can share your thoughts with me. Reach out to us on social media. But we're going to pause there for now. And when we come back, we get into some more conversations, sticking with psychology this morning. But this particular topic now about racism here in TNT, a lot more needs to be said and perhaps done. We'll be right back after this.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw,
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. Now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy declared loneliness a new public health epidemic in the U.S. last month in an 85-page advisory. So then the question was posed, is Trinidad and Tobago becoming lonelier? Well, first we need to understand exactly what loneliness is from a psychological perspective, if there are different types, and if loneliness affects a specific group of people. Well, I'm joined by President-elect of the TT Association of Psychologists, Ms. Kelly McFarlane. She's with us via Zoom. Hello, Ms. McFarlane. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for joining me. Let's start where I ended my introduction, and that is the definition of loneliness and if there are types of loneliness.
So loneliness is quite a subjective experience whereby a person might feel like the quality or quantity of their interpersonal relationships are lacking or not optimal. So there is a sense of, there are different types, sure. There is the sense of existential loneliness where we feel like really disconnected from the wider world in general or from people in general. There is a sense of social loneliness whereby we feel, again, like our connections aren't optimal or aren't really nourishing or nurturing that part of us that needs to be connected to other human beings. And of course, there's emotional loneliness whereby we have a deep sense of longing for deep connection, but it's even in the connections that we have, we don't feel that level of support.
Mm-hmm. Now, does loneliness actually affect a specific grouping of people? And by extension, what are the factors that contribute to loneliness?
Loneliness can affect anyone, honestly, even people who have lots of people around them, huge, come from big families. And again, this is why it's such a subjective experience. It's a lot of times it's also in the way that we perceive our world or the realities that we've experienced, growing up and so on. So again, sort of inherent in loneliness is this feeling that, the connections aren't safe or aren't healthy with other people or within the world itself. And so we don't think that we could actually be safe in connecting with other people, sharing space, sharing time, talking, feel like people are involved with us, feel like we're being emotionally nurtured. And so anyone can experience that even when surrounded by people, whether the people around us really aren't very connected and aren't very safe, or perceived, being that, let's say in the past, we've had experiences where people have betrayed us or hurt us, and then we've decided, well, everyone is going to hurt us and betray us. So even when meeting new people, we kind of cast a net across everyone and say, oh, I know they're going to betray me or hurt me, and so I'm not allowing myself to connect completely. Now, we are evolved to need and to desire social connection. So this goes against the sort of the nature of human existence.
Now, okay, that leads me to another question, or actually a couple other questions, because one, trying to balance reality and the virtual world, is that also a contributing factor? We are born for socialization, we crave socialization, but we tend, and what we're seeing now is a lot more socialization taking place in the virtual world. How is that affecting our mindsets and even our ability to interact with one another in person?
So the thing about the virtual world is that we get snapshots of people's lives. Oftentimes, the best aspects of people's lives, the most fun aspects of people's lives, and it happens quite rapidly with a lot of people. And so it starts to send this idea that people have these large friend groups and people have all this stuff going on and everybody's all content and happy, because those are the bits that you're seeing mostly. And what I find that happens is that people start now judging themselves and their own lives against what they're seeing on social media. And, it's kind of looking at these snapshots of the best parts of many people's lives is kind of a difficult thing to measure yourself against. And if that's what we start putting our self-worth and our value on, then that becomes a very slippery slope into, discontentment with self, with your own life, loneliness, depression, etc., because it's a difficult marker to hit. Nevertheless, people tend to want to follow and follow the lives of people who have all of that. The more they have, the more we follow. And so that, contributes definitely to this sort of feeling of loneliness and not good enoughness, so to speak.
The other fact is there are some people who just love being alone, who love their own company, who crave that isolation. They actually appreciate that isolation. Is anything wrong with that?
Absolutely not. So we have different personality types. Let's say for introverts get their energy restored when they are alone, reading a good book or just spending time by themselves. And, extroverts, on the other hand, kind of need to pull energy from outside. So for an introvert or for a person who just prefers to be alone a lot of the time, it wears them out, it burns them out to be around people a lot. Now, the difference is if you are alone, if you spend a lot of time alone, but you're happy and you're content, and that's what makes you, comfortable, that's fine. There's not a problem. That's why we say, it's a subjective experience. It's not a problem to be alone. On the other hand, there are psychological conditions that, make it so that we want to be alone more, some neurodivergence, schizoid personality types. So there are psychological conditions that contribute to it. And then, thirdly, so if a person is spending a lot of time alone, but they feel discontent, they feel, sad a lot of the time, they've been losing energy, they feel a sense of doom or worthlessness or hopelessness in the world, or they're doing it not because they choose to, but they're doing it because they feel that they have to because people aren't safe, that's when we say, well, okay, maybe we need to look a little further into this, in terms of your health and your well-being. But if you're alone a lot, but you're still able to maintain, good, solid social connections, then that's quite healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there significant health consequences associated with loneliness and isolation, or even that affecting pre-existing illnesses?
Absolutely. So the mind and the body are very connected. What happens in the mind affects the body, and what happens in the body definitely affects the mind. So when looked up something like loneliness, and loneliness could lead to other conditions like anxiety, depression, etc., that could actually reduce or lower your immune system, right? So your ability to fight off diseases. But loneliness is also linked to things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, other things that are very serious chronic physical illnesses. So it is in fact very much dangerous, for your well-being and your health. In fact, it's compared to smoking a box of cigarettes.
Really?
That's how, yes, it's a serious we call them psychological injuries. It's a serious psychological injury, loneliness and depression. So yes, it's very, very much not a very healthy thing.
That is rather incredible, what you just referred to. Is there, well, with all this being said, then there's an absolute need now to create spaces where people can socialize with each other. But is there also a need to create spaces where we teach people how to socialize with each other?
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. But another part of teaching people how to socialize with each other, or for people socializing with each other, is confidence, and we lose confidence for different reasons, either because we've had negative experiences with people, or we've had negative experiences just right in our homes, in our family, from trauma, right? But so sometimes it's about building yourself from the inside out so that you feel more confident and more able to establish relationships and feel safe in relationships. And so outside of that, certainly, yes, there could be things that, courses and so on that could help us figure out how to make social connections, how to figure out who is safe and when it is safe and what's appropriate if we have a problem with social appropriateness. But again, I think for the most part, confidence building, feeling good about yourself so that you feel comfortable and confident going into other people's space is the primary concern.
I don't want to digress too much, but that word confidence, a huge word. I mean, we could probably have an entire discussion about that. But if we are to actually, raise awareness with regard to that, is there a further need to first teach individuals how to accept and deal with disappointment?
Oh, yes, indeed. Sure, certainly. You see, we don't always get all of the lessons that are important for life and for social interactions and for our continued social development from home. Sometimes we come from a home where the persons who raised us themselves never really knew. And so sometimes we really do need that extra help, and we really do need outlets or places that we can go to learn these things. And a lot of times we don't realize that we need to learn these things, right? So absolutely 100% yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, in a society which arguably has become so narcissistic, where many people are now just concerned with themselves, taking care of themselves, looking after myself. And at times we can even say that there's this ignorance to one another. How do we now go about, I mean, we're having a conversation here this morning, which is possibly a start. But if that narcissism does exist, how do we try to actually progress? I mean, would that involve having, you can't change somebody's personality, but could you change somebody's mindset and possibly way of thinking?
Sure, yes. So a lot of times it's kind of what the majority is doing. So again, because you mentioned, social media, and that, we've really shifted into a big social media space, and that lots of people spend hours and hours and hours of their time scrolling through social media. So if the culture shifts, whether it's inherited culture or it's our own culture, just happens to shift in that way, you find more and more people start going with the status quo. If that culture shifts back in a different way, then you might find more and more people start going with that. So for instance, when we start talking about empathy a lot more, and we start convicting people about empathy. I was listening to a radio show recently whereby they were talking about the fact that before helping people, we tend to film, right? We pull out the phones and we film, and that this is such an issue. Now, let's say a year or two ago, it was, hey, yeah, everybody got this on film. It's great. So now we're all getting things on film because that's what we do. Now we shift the conversation to, come on, guys, we don't like this. We're not going to praise you. We're not going to reward you for doing this. We want you to help people before you start filming. So you'd find that more and more people start helping people, or maybe filming themselves helping people, but they will start focusing on, I need to help people other than just film. So that's just an example of, when we start making mass shifts, it starts with one person or one group, we find that the rest of the culture starts to follow suit eventually, if it's something. Our brains have a massive reward system, and we get rewarded by compliments, affirmations, likes, etc. So when we start getting those things, it tells our brains, okay, this is what we need to do more of. So, when we're thinking of trying to get major change in policies in governments and organizations and cultures, etc., we should think about the brain's reward system and how we could kind of get that on a big or mass level.
Well, Ms. McFarlane, I think we've covered quite a bit, and I think we've opened up other topics this morning: confidence, disappointment, empathy, understanding. Those are just some of the things that we were able to introduce. So there's a lot more to get involved in, but unfortunately we're out of time. So I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning. And I look forward to future conversations as we continue to explore such topics. But for now, thank you, and do have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care. Ms. Kelly McFarlane joining me this morning as we speak about isolation, whether or not there is a growing epidemic of loneliness here in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, confidence, disappointment, empathy, understanding. Those are the 4 words that you need to think deeply about as you go out doing your business throughout the day. And ladies and gentlemen, that's break for news on the hour. We'll be right back after this.
7 is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The perfect mix of news, current affairs, talk, debate, mature discussions, comedy and sports. Only at WESN, the content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at Southern Main Road, McBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Coming up on Nicole Larson Live. It was in 2018 where something happened.
I got a call. It was the third day. He said, let me tell you what you're going to hear tomorrow. Tomorrow you're going to hear that they have found him. He has floated to the top. He would be decomposed. He would be smelling awful. And I'm listening to him on the phone because he is just giving me the cold, hard facts.
Even though it takes time, time alone will not heal. You cannot heal what you do not acknowledge.
The unconscious socializing is what we need to check, because I was just doing it to avoid being home. I don't want to be in the bedroom because it's not the same anymore.
You can be happy, hurting, and healing all at the same time.
I choose to have gratitude. My soul is safe with Christ. I choose to be, yeah, the grateful one.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the content capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back 3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough. It's $200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for staying with us this morning. We're now speaking about international obligations versus domestic law, specifically taking a look at the 1951 Geneva Convention, or to be more specific, the Refugee Convention. Now, let me introduce you to this topic by speaking about a case that Justice Frank C. Prasad was overseeing. Justice Frank C. Prasad was presiding over a judicial review and constitutional claim of Venezuelan national Johan Jesus Dominguez, who challenged a deportation order by the Minister of National Security in March. Dominguez, 33 years of age, was charged with illegal entry in August of last year. His application said he fled Venezuela in fear of being persecuted by the country's government. He was granted refugee status by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNHCR, in April last year, so this would have been August of 2021, and in April last year, but was arrested months later while in a taxi in Faizabad. The father of 4 pleaded guilty to illegally entering TNT and was fined $2,000. In March of this year, he was issued a deportation order. Now, the controversy surrounds the judgment of Justice Frank C. Prasad, and that is, refugees and asylum seekers can be deported if they run afoul of local immigration laws, since obligations under the 1951 UN Convention and the principles of non-refoulement do not apply to TNT, as they are not incorporated into the domestic laws in TNT. It means all migrants are subject to provisions of the Immigration Act, and they, asylum seekers and refugee seekers, can be deported even if they are registered with the UNHCR. So that is the introduction to this topic. Yes, quite a long introduction, but you need to have an understanding of the case and an understanding of the convention before we can continue. So I'm now joined by my guest, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, Ms. Denise Pitcher. She's with us via telephone call. Hello, Ms. Pitcher. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Keaton, and thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for joining me. Ms. Pitcher, your reaction to the judgment by Justice Frank C. Prasad?
So it's very concerning. As an advocate of human rights and an advocate of refugee rights, our most immediate concern is that if the family is deported, that they will be sent back to a situation, a dangerous situation from which they fled, and it then, of course, this ruling, it paves the way for other persons to be deported and send persons back to a situation. A lot of people that are fleeing persecution, are fleeing very dangerous situations. Sometimes they are fleeing the threat of death, threats of safety and to their safety and security. So it's very, very worrying.
Ms. Pitcher, we signed onto this convention in the year 2000. It has been 23 years. We have not, however, incorporated it into our domestic laws. Are there obligations by the government as signatories to the convention to incorporate domestic laws?
Well, that's it's understood by states that once they've acceded to these conventions, the next step is to integrate it into domestic legislation. And while we have not integrated it into domestic legislation as yet, there have been actions by the state that can be interpreted as complying with its obligations. I mean, for example, we have a refugee unit that's been established within the Ministry of National Security, and that does deal with refugees and asylum seekers. So we are already complying with our obligations. We have allowed persons to come enter Trinidad and Tobago and register with UNHCR. So we are honoring our obligations, even though it's not been incorporated into domestic legislation. And it's also important. This is also a very important point to emphasize, is that Trinidad and Tobago, we're a member of an international community that strives to uphold and protect human rights. And refugee rights are human rights. And sending persons back. This particular case, they're recognized refugees, so they're entitled to protection, human rights protection, and by sending them back, we're sending up. We are possibly placing them at risk.
What are your thoughts on the 2014 policy that government formulated and was adopted by Cabinet? I know you mentioned that, yes, you see the efforts being made, but specifically to the 2014 policy.
So the 2014 policy, it definitely needs revision. At the time that it was drafted, we did not have the numbers of asylum seekers and refugees that we now have. And it's also not, comprehensive. It doesn't take into account a number of different issues that asylum seekers and refugees encounter. I haven't taken a look at it recently, so I can't tell you off the top of my head. However, we did go one step further and develop what's called Immigration Manual Volume 1, which is a very comprehensive framework that guides the state in how we treat it with asylum seekers and refugees. And it's very detailed, it's very, very comprehensive. And so if there's supposed to be any revision of this policy, as the Minister of National Security has said, our hope is that the framework that has been outlined through the Immigration Manual Volume 1 will also be taken into consideration in the development or the refinement of a refugee policy.
Now, here's where it gets a bit confusing. Article 31 of the Convention states that no signatories are, and I quote, to impose penalties on account of their illegal entry or presence, end quote, of any asylum seekers. So therefore, is it that this particular order is now actually us contradicting what we are signatories to?
Yes, correct. So the non-penalization principle is a fundamental principle, of the Refugee Convention, and, it's customary international law. It's understood by everyone that persons who arrive at our shores and declare an intent to seek asylum, they should not be penalized for illegal entry or irregular entry. And the reason for that is when people are, fleeing their country of origin, a lot of the times they don't have time because of the urgency with which they may have to flee. They may not have time, to prepare travel documents. They may not be able to get a visa. They may not have travel documents. Oftentimes, they may not even have the money to take regular routes. And sometimes, they may have to go on foot or through, cheaper, irregular routes. And so that non-penalization principle is there to cater for all of these challenges that persons fleeing persecution may have to deal with, and hence they should not be penalized.
What do you think this now means for Trinidad in terms of the international arena? This particular case, how would it affect our status internationally?
I mean, it's definitely something to concern the international community and our international partners. Our hope is that the attorneys appeal this case, and hopefully there's a different outcome that respects the human rights of asylum seekers and refugees. But there's no question that members of the international community who also, consider themselves defenders and protectors of human rights would be concerned by this ruling.
Now, you're quoted as saying that there is a need to protect these people, asylum seekers and refugee seekers.
Yes.
But there is also an understanding that in terms of our social positions, our economic positions, that may be very difficult to do so. Is it possible for TNT to somehow find a balance, or is it just too difficult of a task for us to handle at this point?
And, that's a very good point, right? And it's true. We are a small country, and our resources are, limited. But we do exist in a reality where we are right next to one of the largest migration movements since World War II. And we have to find a way to manage it, because they are coming to our shores, and they're coming through irregular routes, and that's placing them, at risk of being smuggled and trafficked. And, our objective should be to have some sort of humane migration pathway. Additionally, Trinidad and Tobago, we have not really engaged as substantively as we should with other regional mechanisms and international mechanisms that would provide support, technical expertise, and capacity building, and also resources that could support our efforts to manage this influx in a humane way. For example, we did not sign on to the LA Declaration at last year's Summit of Americas. And, within that declaration, it talks about responsibility sharing. It talks about, providing resources to member states who sign on to the declaration. So those are some ways that we can receive assistance and to be able to manage it. Because right now, it's almost as though, we're kind of looking at the situation and throwing our hands up in the air. Okay, well, we're a small country, and too many people are coming. To what we have to manage it responsibly. Mm-hmm.
So 25,000 asylum and refugee seekers from 38 countries as of April 2023.
Yeah.
Do we understand from all levels, whether it be from a government perspective or even from the public perspective, do we understand the obligations that we have to protect these people?
Well, I mean, I still think the refugee concept is still relatively new to the general public, and this is where CCHR continues to engage in educational efforts. Other international organizations here, they are also doing sensitization exercises to create that awareness, and they've also done sensitization exercises with state agencies so that there's a greater understanding of our obligations to protect asylum seekers and refugees, and we will continue with these efforts. What I would emphasize is that they are vulnerable people, and they come fleeing very serious circumstances, and at the very least we should treat them with humanity and have a greater understanding of the fact that they're fleeing serious persecution, dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Pitcher, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning to share with us your thoughts, your reactions as to this particular ruling, and stating where we're at and what more could be done. As mentioned, I think I agree with you that this concept of refugee and asylum seeker is still fairly new to the public, so education is quite important. I'm not even sure if we were aware, if the public was aware that we were actually signatories to the convention prior to this ruling. So thank you very much for joining us this morning and for sharing this information with us.
Thank you for having me.
Do have a good day. Ms. Denise Pitcher, Executive Director at the Caribbean Center of Human Rights, following Justice Frank C. Passad's ruling that TNT is not bound by the UN Convention. He says that no international body can, at this stage, mandate or demand that this sovereign republic is bound by or that it must adhere to and or implement the 1951 Refugee Convention obligations. No court can legitimately usurp the authority of a government to formulate its macroeconomic and socio-policy positions. He acknowledges, however, that the indecisions has not augured well for the Republic, and that is with regard to the fact that we do have a framework, the 2014 policy, but our domestic laws actually do not align with the convention. A proactive legislative response is now urgently required to deal with this current circumstance. Proactive, I don't think so. It's more so obviously reactive at this point. He also states that there was no evidence to suggest that the 2014 policy formed part of the Immigration Division's practices or procedures which would have allowed asylum refugee status to seekers and override the provisions of the Immigration Act, and that this may not actually go well with international bodies. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, with the time that we have left, I just want to get in very quickly to one regional update, and this is coming from Ghana, because I think last week we updated you with respect actually, my director is saying that we need to take a quick break here. So let's take that break, and when we return, we'll see if we can get into that regional update. If not, we have time tomorrow. Stay tuned. Fortunately, we do have time to share with you the update coming from Guyana President. By the way, this is to do with the situation with regards to honey exports to Trinidad and Tobago. We shared with you that update last week, following which President of the Republic of Guyana, Dr. Irfan Ali, has said that he believes this issue will soon be addressed by the Twin Island Republic. I am wondering if this is something that was raised during the 45th General Conference for Heads of Government, but President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Justice Adrian Saunders, encouraged members of the private sector to take their grievances to the regional court if they believed those aren't being adequately addressed. This report from Ghana.
We are in a different regime, and so there's just no scope to sit by and to see your rights compromised, if you think that they are being compromised by the decisions of a state, and grumble about it. The court is there to receive applications and to process those applications.
That was Justice Adrian Saunders, the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, speaking at a business breakfast at the Marriott Hotel in Kingston, Georgetown, on Monday. At that meeting, the CCJ president posited that the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, CSME, which promotes free trade within the Caribbean community, is expected to be private sector driven. And according to him, the CSME would work more effectively if the private sector were to test it by seeking redress for grievances. Doing so can involve the CCJ. Meanwhile, Director of External Trade at CARICOM Secretariat's Directorate of the Caribbean Single Market and Trade, Dr. Chantal Ononaiu, acknowledged concerns raised, but says there are other avenues to address matters.
Adjudication before the court is but one mechanism available when issues arise. States can engage in consultations. States can use the good offices of the Secretary General. States can have reference to impartial third parties like mediators or conciliators. They can refer a matter to arbitration.
The CCJ, in its original jurisdiction, can adjudicate matters under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which is CARICOM's central treaty that, among other things, caters for the CSME. Reporting for the newsroom, Vishani Raghaber.
The honey issue is one that we have raised at CARICOM, and to be fair, Prime Minister Rowley had said that they are going to address the honey issue. It's an outdated law. I can't pronounce on that system, but I know that it is an item on the CARICOM agenda, and for not only Guyana, but Grenada also. You can't give up. We have to have hope that it will change. I think that there is a mood now. My own opinion is that there is a mood in the region now to have these trade barriers and these challenges addressed. And I'm very confident that that mood can bring us results.
The sector has been growing in Grenada, and we have top quality honey. We just won a prize in England for the best honey in the Caribbean. There's a demand for it in the Trinidad market, and we are being kept out of that market. So we are negotiating, and we are talking with Trinidad. Trinidad is offering. They are negotiating with us nicely, and I definitely believe that after the CARICOM heads meet soon, we will have some resolution.
All right, so that obviously is on the CARICOM agenda stated by President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, wondering if he got time to raise it during the conference, or whether or not more needs to be said, more time needs to be given. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for Amplia this morning. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Keaton Shaw, wishing you a grand day ahead, maybe a productive one, and in whatever you do, understanding, empathy, of course, those are things that are crucial for all of us to be kind to one another. Anyway, tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. AM Prime, but until then, bye-bye.
Young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
It's not often you see someone in Japan holding a gun. These hunters are among a small number of people, along with police officers and sport shooters, who are permitted to own firearms. Applying for a gun license is a complicated process that includes a written exam, mental health checks, and even testimony from family and friends.
The police told my neighbours I had applied for a gun licence and asked them if they considered me dangerous or if there had ever been any friction between us. They asked my wife, "Your husband has applied for a firearm, does that worry you?" If she had said yes, I would have been immediately disqualified.
Owners must have their guns inspected every year as part of a series of measures to prevent serious crimes.
We're motivated to begin with. We want to own a gun license, but because the whole process takes so long, some people lose interest. Younger people who want to become hunters get fed up and abandon the idea of owning a gun.
Japan is proud of its low rate of gun crime. While there are no official figures on the number of illegal firearms, estimates say there is less than one firearm per 100 inhabitants. In France, it's 80 times higher, and 500 times higher in the US, where there are more guns than people. Popular antipathy towards guns in Japan dates back to the 19th century, when the new Meiji emperor asked citizens to register their firearms to protect his position. After the Second World War, US occupation forces confiscated guns, which they associated with wartime militarism. 75 years later, hardly anyone is interested in owning a gun.
It's normal to go through all the checks. Since the regulations on owning firearms came into force, every time there's a serious terrorist incident or shooting overseas, the laws here become even stricter.
One exception is the Yakuza, Japanese crime syndicates that sell arms illegally. This former police officer was part of a team that tackled the trade in illegal firearms.
Sometimes Yakuza sell guns to people who are not members of the Yakuza themselves. We know illegal firearms are smuggled in from the Philippines, North Korea and Russia. These days we also come across homemade and lethal guns manufactured with a 3D printer. It's hard to control them.
Here's a replica of the gun used in the fatal shooting of Shinzo Abe in July 2022, while the former Prime Minister was making a campaign speech. His assassination made news around the world and prompted a discussion about how this could have happened in Japan, where gun violence is rare.
The alleged murderer said that he had made the bullets from spent cartridges that he filled with powder and ball bearings, and then loaded them into his gun.
Takakura says it isn't hard to make a homemade gun, and for very little money, by watching online tutorials.
It would cost you about 150 euros to make this gun. They can't be tested indoors, so people try them out in remote areas where no one can see or hear them.
Abe's death shocked Japan and reinforced anti-gun sentiment here, with authorities tightening online access to information on homemade guns.
I am against civilians owning guns. Just look at America. There are so many shooting incidents at schools because guns are so prevalent.
I'm satisfied with the approach we take in Japan and glad that I live in a country like this. I don't know much about the law on owning firearms. I'm getting old, and I've gone through my entire life without having to worry about guns.
Murders using firearms are rare, just a single case in 2021 in a country of 125 million people. Most murders in Japan involve swords and knives, although some of those are also subject to strict controls.
If you have a small knife in your car or in your pocket, you can be arrested. But katana are different. You could take one to a shopping mall or subway station and it wouldn't be a problem. You just can't do this.
A katana can be carried with a valid reason and must be properly concealed. Once the preferred weapon of samurai warriors, even these are strictly regulated. Owners must register their swords as cultural properties, an arrangement designed to both ensure public safety and protect the country's heritage.
After World War II, the U.S. Army confiscated our katana. So many of them were stolen and ended up all over the world. We worked hard to get swords protected as cultural property, and that has enabled us to recover some of them.
In 2021, Japan registered more than 9,000 new katana, as opposed to just 580 firearms. It's been more than 7 decades since the country decided to make guns a rarity, and it wants to keep it that way. On the other side of the Pacific, meanwhile, gun violence continues to destroy thousands of lives every year.
Controlled burns are a common sight in these parts. In central Brazil, landowners use them to expand their soy farms, a crop whose production continues to soar, along with international demand. Thousands of square kilometers of natural vegetation have disappeared this year alone.
There are immense fields as far as the eye can see, mostly soybeans and corn. It's quite chilling, because you realize that the entire area has been completely transformed.
The soybeans have just been planted. Much of it's destined for export, as feed for livestock in meat and dairy production. NGOs say most of France's soy comes from this municipality, Formosa do Rio Preto.
More than 300,000 tons of soy used in France come from here. That represents about 100,000 hectares of soy produced right here. France is highly dependent on this area.
The region lives off and for industrial agriculture. Adverts for seed, fertilizer and farming equipment line the roads, and new towns have popped up in a matter of years. There's even a program dedicated to intensive farming on local radio, giving the latest news on the sector.
It's impressive. We've hit a new soy production record in the region for 2021 to 2022.
In the Cerrado, Brazil's vast savanna region, the area converted to farmland has gone up 50% in the last 35 years. These soybean producers export to China, Europe and North America. They say they're simply feeding the world and don't understand the EU's desire to reduce imports and produce more of its soy at home.
At the moment, your plate is full, so it's very easy to ask us to stop cutting down trees and stop producing here. But when you have nothing to eat, How will your people react?
As the savannah goes up in smoke, communities who live on the fringes of the fields are victims too, like the Gerizeiros, who've lived here for 200 years. They claim they're subject to harassment and violence by farmland security. Fernando Ferreira Lima says he was shot in the leg last year.
They started firing at us. I got shot. I kept running, but after a while I fell over.
It took 12 hours to get him to hospital, where he was saved from the brink of death.
Scared. Very scared. I was scared of dying, of losing my family. I have a son.
The river near the village is polluted with pesticides that run off the fields. This doesn't stop them from using the water to wash themselves, their clothes or their dishes.
It's sad for us. People here don't eat what's produced here. Instead, it's consumed abroad.
As well as destroying our environment and nature, they're making other countries rich. While here, we go hungry.
With each new farm, land rich in biodiversity is lost. Although not as well known as the neighbouring Amazon, the Cerrado is home to 5% of all species on the planet.
WESN.
Said that ties between the White House and Downing Street are rock solid. That came ahead of his meeting with Rishi Sunak. He is now on his way to meet King Charles III. And the Israeli parliament is set to vote on the controversial judicial overhaul bill that would exclude the judiciary's power to rule on the reasonableness of government decisions. Demonstrators have vowed to press on with even more mass protests if that bill passes. We'll hear from our correspondent in a few minutes. But first for you this hour, then, NATO has proven more united than perhaps many had expected in the wake of the war in Ukraine. But the annual summit this week in Vilnius, Lithuania, will put that to the test on several different fronts. Among them, the alliance struggling to reach an agreement on admitting Sweden. Now, Turkey had been blocking its membership bid over the Nordic country's support for Kurdish groups, but it adopted a radical change in tune just moments ago. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan saying on Monday that he could back Sweden's NATO candidacy if the EU resumes its own long-stalled membership talks with Turkey. Earlier, I spoke to France 24's correspondent in Ankara, Jasper Mortimer, and I asked him what the chances are that the EU will soften its stance on Turkey's membership bid. Here's what he had to say.
French President Emmanuel Macron has made it clear that Turkey is far from joining the EU, and numerous reports from the EU Commission have accused Erdogan's government of taking Turkey away from EU principles of governance. Erdogan is a clever politician with an uncanny insight into what his voters want. But I think in linking Sweden's membership to Turkey's membership of the EU, he's actually made a mistake. Up until now, he has maintained that his opposition to Sweden's membership of NATO is based on principle, that Sweden supports Turkish militants, Kurdish militants and Gulenists, whom Erdogan accuses of being terrorists. Now, by linking the Swedish membership with Turkey's own membership bid of a different organization, we see that it's just a matter of a bargaining position. This is pure politics. Something else he said as he was about to leave for the NATO summit. He said that Turkey's approval of Sweden's bid to join NATO and the US sale of F-16 fighter bombers to Turkey should not be linked. Now, that was very interesting. They are linked. The US Congress has made that quite clear, and Erdogan doesn't want them to be linked.
Next, Joe Biden is embarking on a three-nation trip to Europe this week for a packed agenda dominated largely, of course, by continuing to try to rally the international community behind Ukraine. Despite some rather substantial disagreements on Washington sending cluster munitions to Kyiv and Kyiv's bid to join NATO, the U.S. president touted a, quote, rock-solid friendship with the UK ahead of his meeting this morning with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Here's Gavin Lee with the details.
A Baltic welcome for the world's biggest military alliance. Amidst everyday life, it's hard to miss the projection of power. 31 Western leaders about to arrive for the most high-profile meeting Lithuania's ever hosted. The stakes are high. The decisions taken here will shape Ukraine's ability to regain occupied territory. It's now more than 500 days since Russia's full-scale invasion, and Ukraine's leader is persistent in his request for NATO membership. In Poland at the weekend, he's told reporters he won't be sitting by watching from the sidelines.
In this case, it's obvious that I'll be there and I'll be doing whatever I can in order to, so to speak, expedite that solution.
His NATO request was met with this emollient message at the pre-summit press conference from NATO Secretary-General.
I expect our leaders will reaffirm that Ukraine will become a member of NATO and unite on how to bring Ukraine closer to its goal.
The reality is, while Ukraine is in conflict, here fighting around Bakhmut on Friday, several members are against extending the welcome. The response from NATO's biggest backer, the US, is now is not the moment. Let's talk again after the war. But for President Biden, in London first for talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and King Charles, he knows a strong message of unity matters at the summit. The Kremlin's looking for cracks in the alliance. The latest test, the US providing cluster bombs for Ukraine, banned in 120 countries, condemned by human rights groups. Britain, Spain, Canada and other NATO signatories to the treaty have indicated their discomfort. Another moment to watch from Vilnius, whether Sweden could be accepted as a new member after months of opposition from Turkey and Hungary. Last-minute talks still ongoing, with no immediate sign of a breakthrough.
Well, for more analysis on this, on both Joe Biden's meeting with Rishi Sunak and a look ahead at that NATO summit, we're going to cross now to Denis McShane, the former British Minister of European Affairs. Hello, sir. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today.
Great pleasure. I'm speaking to you from Athens, where I should think our Greek friends might have a line or two on Mr. Erdogan joining the European Union, but that's probably not going to be raised at Vilnius. It's a very interesting development. I think Mr. Erdogan is smelling the fact that President Putin is not looking good, and as your commentator said, Erdogan is a shrewd politician, and he's going to stop backing a loser, and that's, I think, some of the smoke signals we're seeing today.
Very glad to have your take on that, sir, because I was going to ask you about it. Well, maybe if we have time, turn back to it later, but I do want to start with the meeting between Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden. It almost felt like a formality. It didn't last very long. Joe Biden is, of course, already heading to meet with the king. What does that suggest about the state of their relationship, if anything?
There's not much of a relationship. I mean, Rishi Sunak is one of the most polite people on God's earth, and so he's not pompous and stupid like Boris Johnson was. He's not a serial liar like Boris Johnson. So he'll get on fine. He's a Silicon Valley billionaire, Goldman Sachs banker. He understands America. But I think what is interesting is the importance that Mr. Biden is making in going to see the king. You're going to see two heads of state, both, let's say, no longer young men, no longer in the first flush of youth, in their late 70s into 80, and the press in England, the right-wing press, the anti-European press, the Tory press, keep denouncing President Biden as senile, always falling over. You know, he should be in an old person's home. And here he is saying, hey, you said the same stuff about Ronald Reagan. I'm meeting your king, who isn't a young man. He's about my age. And we two heads of state, you know something? We're going to be hanging around for a bit longer than you guys realize.
Well, Joe Biden, you did say that Rishi Sunak is a polite prime minister compared to Boris Johnson, but there are some major disagreements between his government and Joe Biden, notably on those cluster munitions and on Ukraine's possible path to NATO membership. How important do you think these disagreements are?
I would relativize them as somebody who did a lot of negotiating. I also was responsible as Britain's Europe minister for starting the talks, or getting Britain to support starting the talks with President Erdogan at the time. I could tell you lots of anecdotes about that, but okay, leave that for later. Right now, yes, Britain does not support the use of cluster weapons. It's signed an international treaty against them with 120 other countries. The United States never signed that treaty, so technically it is legally in the clear. And the real problem is that the Ukrainians are asking for these weapons. The Russians have been using them non-stop since almost day one of Putin's invasion of Europe, of Ukraine. And the Europeans and the United States have not provided sufficient arms, that's to say shells, bullets, missiles, bombs, all the stuff you use in warfare. You'd think by now, 18 months into the war, we could have got a few more factories going. You know, they're very profitable. The companies who make them make lots of money. But we've just been so poorly led across the field, in my view, in providing Ukraine with, giving Ukraine what it takes. As Churchill said to Roosevelt, give us the tools and we will do the job. We'll finish the job. Zelensky's been saying to Biden and Sunak and Macron and Scholz, give me the tools, and believe me, my boys can see this through. And unfortunately, we haven't. And so now, in desperation, Biden is sending them the cluster bombs.
Sir, I do kind of want to follow. This is unfortunately the last question we'll be able to get through together, but I do want to follow up on a little bit of what you said there. You said that these are the kind of things that we need in war, that the West has been kind of slow to give Ukraine all of what it needs. But does the fact that 120 nations have banned them, does that not matter? Does it not take away a little bit from the West's credibility when it comes to human rights and kind of just warfare?
Let me say something very unpleasant. When you engage the kind of all-out war, killing children, killing innocent people, killing novelists that Putin has started, then some of the finer niceties of human rights aren't obeyed. Yes, of course, it would be better if cluster bombs were not used, but they were used by Putin to kill innocent Ukrainians, and we have not provided sufficient weapons. So this people don't understand, I think, at times, just how god-awful war is. It's not a set of newspaper articles. These are men and women shedding their blood to defend Europe's freedom. We, in my view, should be sending them far more of necessary wherewithal to achieve that aim, and say quietly to Mr. Putin, hey, forget about Biden and King Charles. Maybe you should think about retirement, old boy.
Dennis McShane, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreements about that precisely at this NATO summit on Tuesday. France 24, of course, will be keeping an eye on that. In the meantime, thank you very much, Dennis McShane, the former British Minister of European Affairs, for joining us today. Well, moving on now, after Benjamin Netanyahu ordered a 4-month delay in order to allow talks on some of the proposals, Israel's parliament will now be going ahead with a vote on a bill that could limit the power of courts later Monday. The controversial reforms, of course, have sparked one of the country's biggest ever protest movements since the month of January. For more on this, we're going to cross now to our Jerusalem correspondent, Iris Mackler. Hi there, Iris. So what exactly is Parliament voting on Monday night?
Parliament is voting on limiting the court's ability to oversee what the government does, but what other public officials do on the grounds that it's reasonable. This is the first reading of the first prong of the reforms. So a first reading speech on the reasonableness test, and what it would allow Parliament to do, for example, the Prime Minister could appoint his son as Treasurer. If the government let him, the courts couldn't intervene because it was unreasonable. The government could fire the Attorney General, or they could bring back a politician that they wanted to bring back who has a history of corruption, And those last two, the Attorney General and the political ally, are what they are planning to do, exactly those two things. And we know that because they have said so. We've heard politicians on the right explaining that that's what they're going to do. This is also the most drastic version of this particular bill that's going ahead now, exactly as it was at the beginning. So you can see why it's so controversial and why there have been such great protests the past 48 hours leading up to it.
So, Iris, how does this particular measure fit into the larger judicial overhaul?
What we have heard from opponents, but now also from members of Parliament, is that they made a mistake the first time round and that they tried to do too much. Now they're going to do it bit by bit. That's the plan. So this is the first bit, a very drastic version. The man who's shepherding it through the Parliament, Simcha Rotman is his name, he said that tomorrow morning after it's passed today, he's preparing the second and third reading speeches. So that'll go through before this parliamentary session ends, that is in a couple of weeks' time. There'll be other bills as well. They're going for it hell for leather, you'd have to say. And that's why the protest movement says that tomorrow is going to be a day of disruption, as they call it, if this does pass tonight. And all indications are that it will pass tonight.
Iris Mackler in Jerusalem, thank you very much for that update. Time now for a reminder of our headlines if you're just tuning in. Ahead of a crucial NATO summit set to start on Tuesday, Turkey changes its tune on Sweden's membership bid. Ankara saying that it could approve Stockholm's candidacy in the military alliance if the Europeans open the way for Turkey to join the EU. Ahead of that annual NATO summit, a veneer of unity amid some rather significant disagreements about Ukraine between the UK and the US. Joe Biden, ahead of his meeting with Rishi Sunak, said that ties between the White House and Downing Street are rock solid. The US president has now arrived at Windsor Castle, where he will be meeting with King Charles III for talks largely on the climate. And the Israeli parliament is set to vote on the controversial judicial overhaul bill that would exclude the judiciary's power to rule on the, quote, reasonableness of government decisions. Demonstrators have vowed to press on with even more mass protests if that bill passes as it's expected on Monday. Well, rhetoric on immigration in France has gradually shifted to the right in recent years. But the country's political class is now reckoning with an unavoidable reality. Many of France's companies simply depend on the labor of undocumented immigrants. The government is weighing offering one-year residency permits then in order to fill some labor shortages, though some ongoing disagreements and recent riots have hampered that bill's progress. The issue merits an urgent response, though, as under the status quo, undocumented migrants are often subjected to abuse and exploitation, the private and public firms hiring them turning a blind eye to their plight. France 24's Samia Metheny, Alexandre Renard, and Camille Nedlek report for Focus.
They're speaking up for the first time. These 6 undocumented migrants were hired by a construction firm promising to help them stay in France legally. Almost all of them worked on large hotels and office buildings for over 3 years, enough to qualify for a residency permit under a proposed new law. To avoid the extra cost of a soon-to-be legal workforce, their employer pressured them and several of their colleagues to resign.
Employers that hire undocumented workers are worried that that source of labor will dry up. They're concerned that these foreign workers will get the right to work legally and ask to have their rights respected.
These builders turned to France's large and powerful left-wing trade union, the CGT, for help.
That is not a good saw. We pay the price. We get injured.
That's how we carry them from the ground floor to the 6th floor, 90 kilos. That's how I ruined my back. I lifted over 28 doors. After 2 days, I felt a pain here. It's over.
This injury happened on the construction site. I was carrying something heavy and I tripped and I hurt myself. When you get injured on site, they tell you not to say that it happened on the job. You have to pay your own medical bills out of pocket.
These workers are like cannon fodder. Some employers who are unable to fill their vacancies legally actively go looking for undocumented people to hire. But the working conditions are so bad, and the pay is so low that even they don't want to do it. And other businesses look to hire these workers simply because it boosts their profit margins.
Escaping abusive labour conditions is a high-stakes gamble. The clandestine workers could be given leave to remain in France legally, or they could be deported. While some workers are hired using their real names, others must lease someone else's identity to the tune of several €100 a month. Moussa fled jihadist violence in Mali a decade ago, but his asylum application wasn't successful.
To work instead of stealing to survive, I paid for someone else's identity. He is here legally. You get everything photocopied, including the social security card and residency permit. I pay 30% of my salary to use his identity. If I earn 1,400, I get €900 and he keeps the rest.
Since 2013, he's gone through 4 aliases. To avoid being ID checked by police, he rarely goes outside, except for food and work.
Bonjour. Since coming here, I've not had a moment's peace. I've been living in fear for 10 years. I dress well, I carry myself well, like an ordinary person. I don't dress like a thug. It's the only thing I have control over.
Back home in Mali, Moussa studied law, but now he's a rubbish collector in the greater Paris suburbs. Around half of his 30 colleagues are in France illegally.
It's not written on your forehead that you don't have papers. When you're undocumented, you don't get paid holidays or unemployment benefits. You can work up to 10 hours a day. Employers see the advantages. You're always available for work, and they always need you to work.
Because his pay slips and tax returns aren't in his name, he had to ask his employer for a certificate proving that he'd been working there for several years.
I need to have my true identity recognized and work legally. Some employers ask for money. Mine wanted €6,000.
Undocumented women are often cleaners. Marie cleans public and private buildings non-stop from 4 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night every day. This charity explained to her that without a paper trail, her past 5 years of work aren't enough to grant her residency in France.
They did it on purpose. There's lots of cleaning ladies who aren't here legally. If you don't have papers, being a cleaner is pretty much the only job you can do. Daycare centers, social services and offices. No workplace can function without us cleaning ladies.
The charity Les Imad helps over 100,000 people a year and has noticed a stark difference in how some newcomers are welcomed.
Ukrainians are treated well in France. We want all foreigners to be treated like this.
Ce que nous réclamons, c'est que tous les étrangers soient traités comme ça.
Solicitor Jean-Albert Guidou has taken on the case of 2 Brazilian cleaners who never got payslips and whose employers stopped paying them. The mother and daughter duo were often together, doing work that was physically grueling.
I worked 12 to 15 hours a day. She never offered me water or food. My mother worked until her fingers bled.
There were days when we couldn't buy food. When I arrived here, I didn't have winter clothes. I scavenged through rubbish bins to find some. It's very tough. We left our country for a better life, and instead, we went through hell.
To get the work permit, unauthorized workers must be in industries with labor shortages, and not all jobs will count.
The jobs that currently qualify are skilled work, but less skilled trades aren't mentioned. Woodworkers and unskilled construction workers aren't on the list. There's no shortage of cleaners, kitchen clerks, or dishwashers, so they aren't included either. The irony is, of course, that these people are migrant workers, and that's why there's no shortage.
As many as 1 million people in France are undocumented workers, and local authorities currently have the power to grant or deny eligible workers legal right to remain in France at their discretion.
Well, just as a quick reminder of one of our top stories here on France 24 this hour, Joe Biden has already met with Rishi Sunak in the United Kingdom. He is now in the process of meeting with King Charles III at Windsor Palace, as you can see in those live pictures. We'll leave you with those images then. That's all for me for today. Thank you for joining us on Live from Paris.
France 24, more than ever before, is your window onto the world.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Now then, to a scandal in the UK that's been all over the newspapers and all over social media at the weekend. So far, unnamed BBC presenter has been accused of paying a 17-year-old for explicit photos. We're going to talk about it in the press review, and Leo has been looking through all the papers for us. How are the papers covering the story, Leo?
As you say, Stuart, this news is absolutely dominating the British press this morning. It's on every single front page. This news, of course, of an unnamed BBC presenter who allegedly paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit photos. I'll start with the tabloids. This is the Star and the Mirror. They have the same lead. They're talking about how the BBC have called in the cops, and officials from the BBC will meet with the Met later on today. You can see from the Daily Mail, they have a similar headline, and they also talk about how the government is now involved, because Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser met with BBC bosses yesterday for what she called urgent talks. She says that time and space is now needed for a full investigation to take place. If we look at the broadsheets, you can see that it's the same headlines. We look at the Times here as well as the Telegraph, focusing on police getting involved. It's also reported that the unknown presenter rang the victim twice last week when this story broke to get them to try and drop the story and to simply ask, what are you doing?
Leo, a lot of the papers are focusing as well on how the BBC could have handled the case, particularly the role of Director General Tim Davie.
Yeah, if we look inside The Guardian, as you say, they're focusing on BBC Director General Tim Davie. They say this is the biggest crisis in what has been a crisis-strewn tenure so far for Tim Davie. How he deals with this could indeed, it could not only define his future, but the future of the BBC as a whole. He's already faced scandals, of course, with Richard Sharp's loan and his relationship with Boris Johnson at the time, and as well with Gary Lineker and over the whole impartiality row that came about a few months ago. A lot of criticism of this whole thing has come from the fact that the BBC have supposedly known about this since May, but the presenter has remained on air for 6 weeks since then, and the only reason that the victim's mother went to the media was because of what she said was BBC inaction, although top figures didn't know about this until last Thursday. I'll show you this from the Times. They say that this BBC could be facing its toughest week since the Jimmy Savile affair, and that BBC's reputation is just destined to take yet another blow. They say even if this case is investigated thoroughly and professionally, there's no way that the BBC can escape this without their reputation being tarnished somewhat.
Let's cross to West Africa for this next story. Yesterday, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu was elected as head of ECOWAS. That's the Economic Community of West African States. How's that been reported in the region then, Leo?
As you say, Stuart, yesterday Nigerian President Bola Tinubu was elected as the 35th chairperson of ECOWAS. Among his priorities, Tinubu says that he wants to work for the defence of democracy, in particular by combating unconstitutional changes. Of course, he's referring to a string of coups in West Africa as of late. According to the Punch, which is a Nigerian newspaper, he is committed to helping the so-called transition countries such as Mali, Guinea and Burkina Faso to rapidly return to democratic rule, as he puts it. We will not sit at ECOWAS like a toothless bulldog. That's what he promises. I'll show you this from Le Jelly, which is a Guinean site. They say that Bola Tinubu is really presenting himself as a redemptive policeman trying to stop an ECOWAS spiral. They nevertheless question his capacity to keep his promises, especially as potential allies are hard to find, they say. They finish with this quote: "In this West African region, leaders concerned about democracy can be counted on the fingers of one hand."
And we're going to finish today in Colombia. This is a story about hippos. These hippos, they're not any old hippo. These are cocaine hippos.
Yeah, so it's not the sequel to Cocaine Bear that you were all thinking. It is something completely different. These hippos aren't actually taking drugs, but there is a genuine worry about these animals taking over the country. As you can see here from Yahoo, they're descendants of 4 hippos that Pablo Escobar kept as pets. They escaped when he died 30 years ago, and their population has expanded. It was 4 at the time. It's over 200 now, and it's come to a point where there's a genuine threat to locals, especially fishermen, because there's no natural predator for the hippo. This article poses the interesting question: how do we solve the cocaine hippo problem? They say that the government could try and kill or capture the animals. What they've settled on, though, they say that one option is to administer contraceptives to the hippos. And look, I don't know who gets that job, but I don't know, it seems like a difficult one to me. Not for me, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather stay in the studio and,
yes,
you know.
we'd all rather go and jump in the Seine, and the story that we've also been following today here on France 24. Thanks very much, Leo. Leo Mugrin there, slightly anxious about those hippos. Don't forget you can catch up with the press review as well, and the accompanying podcast as well on our website. That's at france24.com, so do have a look at that if you possibly can.
Welcome to Live.
WESN.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Talking Point on WESN, your content capital. My name is Sean Michael Small here. Glad to be with you on another beautiful, beautiful morning. It's wonderful how peaceful these days are, at least for some of us. But I guess we just have to enjoy it while it lasts. And like I said, the peace is relative. Of course, those in North Trinidad that had to suffer through water shortages while we're within the wet season and we're waiting for better or worse for the rains to come and to see what's going to happen there. Also, of course, elections are sooner rather than later, I guess you could say. And we've had some controversial political discussions, but we haven't necessarily had any big bacchanal, or maybe we have. For more on that, let's get into this morning's Daily Review. And the first story I wanted to get into, because I believe this is quite important, although I'm not necessarily passing judgment on it yet, but it's something that needs to be highlighted due to the importance, one could argue, to the foundation of our democracy, and that is that at nomination day, some of the less established political parties had complaints. I'm speaking of the PEP, I'm speaking of the Reform Farmers Alliance, as well as the NTA. And the complaints, they're interesting because there are specifics with regards to the conduct of the Elections and Boundaries Commission and how they carried out the process of, accepting or registering nominations. And the complaints, I don't necessarily want to say that they were all this, to summarize, but it seems as though for the most part, a lot of the complaints were about the EBC perhaps being a bit too literal and uncooperative with regards to the rules. Because there were a lot of complaints, it seems as though the RFA had the majority of their candidates, I just want to double check that, but the majority of their candidates seem to have more or less been stopped at the process because of a technicality. They needed to have a document with regards to their logo approval from the commissioner, and they weren't allowed, and the frustration caused them to basically say, I don't know if we want to go through this. Now, a couple of the PEP RFA candidates, I believe a couple of the situations will be taken to court. The problem, of course, as pointed out by one Philip Edward Alexander, I believe, is that unless the court delays the election, which is a whole other topic by itself, then the election will go forward and the court will technically not have a chance to address the situation if they find that the EBC was at fault. So that's one sticking point, that's one catch-22, right? Should this cause the election to be delayed, like I said, I don't know if we're there yet. But we are looking at potentially a significant amount of prospective candidates looking to participate, feeling as though that they were blocked from participation. It wasn't a hard block. It was a kind of a soft thing, an administrative, bureaucratic thing. And in TNT, I would argue, if this is not formally acknowledged, that part of the ease of doing business is the fact that the paperwork, the processes, the bureaucracy at times seems overly difficult. And to some extent it does sift out people, those who want to get things done and those who can't deal with the runaround that they seem to be undertaking. Now, the problem is usually I would believe in the EBC, right? I have not necessarily seen anything to say that the EBC is corrupt. So usually what you get is you get one of the older political parties say, bringing up questions with pointed accusations, and there isn't really much behind it. So I'm not ready to pick at the EBC and potentially undermine one of the main foundational pieces of our democracy for no good reason. The flip side here is that, one, the result is a bit alarming. But more importantly, this isn't necessarily corruption, right? It doesn't have to be corruption. It could be inefficiencies. Or it could be that the people working in the EBC might just be bad at their job. There could be a lot of non-malicious reasons for poor results. And now we have to ask, is this acceptable? Is the EBC's explanation on the situation acceptable? Are we willing to take it when it is more or less said that, I think it's something like 40 candidates of the RFA, right, were eventually reported to have more or less been frustrated to the point of giving up I'm not entirely sure. I want to get the correct wording here. And then, of course, there are other things with regards to spelling. Somebody forgot to put the A in the B thumb. Okay, I kind of understand that, but shouldn't there be quick ways to rectify that? One had to return her documents because a hyphen was not in her name or was in her name. I think in one case, some of the paperwork, it was the fault of the EBC officer. And then there was one case where somebody was cut off right at the time after obeying instructions to go and get something, to get a stamp, I believe, from Justice of the Peace, came back, oh, no, you're a couple minutes too late. And of course, Mr. Alexander pointed out, yes, we extended an election once, but now does the individual have the authority to take somebody that's a couple minutes too late, right? Again, there's one where the Justice of the Peace, sorry, it wasn't a member of the EBC, a Justice of the Peace put 2 letters just over the line when he signed the date, and because of that, the candidate, this one from the NTA, was initially rejected. So the EBC says that, you know, the instances being referenced, at least by the Reunited Farmers Alliance, did not occur on nomination day and in fact happened over the weekend prior and were dealt with quickly by the department. All right, we'll see. Is that good enough? The irony, of course, is what is the results? Because we still have the PEP and the NTA, more or less, and they're not allied, by the way. They don't have a joint horse in the race, ironically speaking. The NTA is off with the UNC. The PEP said, no, we're not going to be with them. So it's a wait and see, because I don't think this is enough to condemn the EBC. But it brings up questions that I think we should not just allow to rest easy. Scrutiny, transparency, they work for you if you let it. But usually, people in public service aren't allowed to answer questions, or they don't want to. Moving on, next story. More on that last line later in the show. Well, after the, I don't necessarily want to say debacle, but to some extent, given the result, given the effect that it had on a significant part of the country, it could be considered a debacle. WASA says they're going to adopt better measures to respond to instances like this. Okay, cool. My question, though, is, what are these better approaches? And what are we not doing? To what extent is resources an issue? To what extent is practicality an issue? Because if this was one pipe that eventually fed water to so much of North Trinidad, we're talking almost, you know, west to east here, it seems. I know you can't literally have a redundant pipe for the entire water network. I mean, you can, but it might be a bit too much of an expense for the ministry to try to undertake that now, for WASA to try to undertake now, because obviously we don't have it. And, you know, it might be impractical to try to dig up the road to try to lay in a secondary backup pipe. But at this pipe sounds potentially as a pipe that might not have been dug on the ground. And more importantly, it's at a central point. So to what extent are we not putting in backups, so redundant systems, where we can, at central points where the water flow essentially is a choke point? It all comes through here. If this shuts down, then it shuts down everywhere. The thing is, with regards to things WASA says, you know, things kids say, things WASA says. Something goes wrong, we'll do better. Okay? I'm pretty sure every time something goes wrong, that's what they say. I don't know if that's the actual experience that we, the people of TNT, enjoy. Rather, I think we continue to experience things WASA does from since time immemorial. It's the same old, same old. And a lot of talk, again, after Petrotrin was given at various points in times, almost annually at one point, about WASA needing to be reformed. And I understand, at least what we could see from the outside looking in, you know, is in line with any topic that deals with WASA's need to be restructured, reformed, reconfigured, however you want to do it. So as long as WASA continues being what it is, potentially overstaffed, with a lot of people who potentially don't really do much work, how can we be confident when the CEO of WASA says, well, things are going to change? Why? Why are things going to change? Is the government going to allocate you more money so that you could spend it on new procedures and equipment? Is the personnel going to somehow become more efficient and more productive? Why are things going to change? Are these systems in place going to radically change? Without those first two things, I don't really see how the third is going to happen. So I'll believe it when I see it. And so far, all I see is the same old, same old. However, I want to thank them for seeing to the issue and getting it done. You know, I'm not entirely sure the fallout of the poor estimation and repairs. It seems that we were able to survive. My concern is, what if things were worse? You seem ill-prepared for real crises. Next question, next topic, next question. Sorry, before I transition to the third topic, one thing that I left out from the first topic with regards to the EBC and the complaints, there's a flip side to that. And the flip side to that is, perhaps we're just seeing more of inexperienced politicians, not prepared. Maybe, but like Philip Edward Alexander says, a lot of money to go through this process, so one would think they would be at least somewhat prepared. All right, third topic. This one is also concerning AG's office reported last week that they were the victim of a cyber attack. How prepared are we to deal with this? I don't know. The Ministry of Digital Transformation weighed in, cool. Of course, the Ministry of Legal Affairs, the Attorney General's office weighed in. National Security, of course, weighed in. There's still concerns. There's still concerns because I very much, part of the problem with this sort of cyber attack, or at least certain types of cyber attack, like ransomware, which is highlighted in one of the reports in the daily newspaper, or viruses, just in general, is that it's not just about your general systems. One would think in a modern office setup, you would have a network, which means all your machines are connected. And that means that all of the machines, and potentially devices, but machines, of all of your workers who need computers, and a lot of entry-level stuff needs computers. It could be somebody senior, right? Doesn't have to just be the new guy, but they're all connected. Their emails are all potentially connected to the network. Their personal browsing, because, you know, are we going to say that all public sector workers are going to be, you know, militant and disciplined about what they do on work machines during work hours? I mean, to be fair, you could take breaks. And if you can take a break, there should be nothing wrong with going on YouTube or answering a personal email. The problem is when you're not cautious enough, or you don't know exactly what to be cautious of, all it takes is for you to go on the wrong site or to open up an email. And if you work in a government ministry, you potentially could be the target of these sort of things, because that's the door to get in. And it's not that difficult. And there's also the wider question, because the TTPS has had concerns and have put out warnings with regards to online fraud. And of course, one of those things is potential for ransomware on your machine, or your personal machine is probably not necessarily under the same risk, but I understand the Ministry of Digital Transformation has made great strides, but all it takes is one individual, and I know for a fact that in at least one state-owned special purpose company, this was an ongoing issue with regards to viruses. And we're talking way back when in the early 2000s. This is an ongoing thing. an ongoing risk, and I have not seen anything to say that that risk has been mitigated. Here's the interesting point. TNT was invited in October 2021 to formally ratify the Budapest Convention, the first international treaty seeking to address internet and computer crime by harmonizing national laws, improvising investigative techniques, and increasing cooperation among nations. We have observer status. We have 5 years in which to ratify the treaty. It's another international treaty. We haven't ratified it yet. Interesting. More, well, not so much more on that, but I just like to point out, we're going to want help based on this international treaty. There's an international treaty that convention that we signed on to that we haven't necessarily implemented here in TNT. More on that later. Last story. So there's at least 2 articles in 2 different daily newspapers that speak about this. And that is, of course, that the Ministry of Education is looking to change the hair policy and include some of the hairstyles which traditionally, since I went to secondary school, have not been allowed. Right, cool. To sum it up, I have 2 interesting observations coming from the opposition's response on the situation. First is by Senator Naked, which has me somewhat confused because he says that the opposition supports the kids that had to sit out of their graduation from Trinity, right? And he said, we, as in the UNC, don't believe in following rules that are stupid. All right, cool. He also said that Dr. Rowley, or at least he's reported to have said that Dr. Rowley is using race to deflect attention away from the performance of his government. And I believe it is over this issue, right? And he also took umbrage to the Minister of Education, her statements. I don't necessarily know why pointing out her hairstyles. I don't know. Maybe he's quoted out of context. But anyway, the long and short is, if this is an attempt to utilize race as a distraction, I would just like to point out that the ministry is changing a policy which has rules that you find stupid. So it's a stupid rule, they're changing the policy that will change the stupid rule. You now decide to take umbrage over what I'm not entirely sure, extends the conversation, you know, and makes it into a further distraction. So if you're concerned about the government pulling you wool over our eyes, technically you are helping. You are helping them because you are debating an issue that you do not disagree with, a policy decision. Otherwise, I would like to know what exactly, you know, maybe you should read up on what's happening. You're not up to date with current events. Maybe he was reported wrong, but I don't know. I don't understand. Why do you disagree with the change in policy? Okay. And then Dr. Tim Gobisang, former Minister of Education, he called it, the change in policy, an attack on the independence of denominational schools as enshrined in the Concordat. Again, I'm partially confused because Trinity is reported to have said that they were following the ministry's guidelines. So the situation that brought up the debate in its most recent iteration involves a school, an Anglican school, that is following the ministry's lead on this. So the ministry changing the policy that Trinity is following in order to affect a different outcome. Again, I don't see the point. Now, I kind of quicker understand where the former Minister of Education is coming from. But I mean, the Minister of Education went on more to say that I believe the long and short is it's not necessarily hard and fast for the denominational schools to necessarily follow this. But we'll see how that plays out because the minister was reported to have, well, it's still up to schools to come up with their own rules based on the ministry's new guidelines. Right, but it's, so we'll see. It all depends on how it's implemented. This is the plan. We're technically on vacation, so We have to wait and see. But again, I kind of confuse the UNC's, well, Dr. Tim Kopi saying I don't know if he's identified as an active supporter of the UNC, but basically, I would hope that the criticisms be a bit more effective and clear. Otherwise, they all just serve to act as a distraction. And there are a lot of things to criticize the government for, especially the Ministry of Education. Don't waste your time on something that technically you agree with. All right, over time. So we end things here. When we come back, gonna touch on a topic, technically, that's from last week, but also has certain aspects that I want to hit this week. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN, your content capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
As Kevin Hart would say, damn! Why we have so much minors out on the streets? There's an after-school program happening there. Side women, don't give up. You know, you can become queen one day. Those companies who are currently looking for their money that they deposited in the Silicon Valley Bank, it's not there. ChatGPT is basically the start of Terminator. Our relationship with the colonial powers is like a relationship with a little bit of abuse that people like to stay in. And we remember how that was. Put in $100 and later tonight, you'll get back $3,000. I promise you. I promise you not. Did you rent an accent while you were across there?
When you're in the proximity of Donald Trump, somehow you adopt his aura.
First of all, I thought the $200 would be more than enough.
$200.
As a goat farmer, I had 3 goats. Yeah, 3 goats and 1 cow. You know the name?
No, I don't.
Right, Messi, LeBron, and Cristiano Ronaldo. And the cow named Haaland.
I love Trinidad and Tobago, you know.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. And Mondays, we tend to deal with more national security issues. Last week, Monday, after the show, the Minister of National Security, he had a press conference to respond to an article in one daily newspaper about the situation with the migrant who was detained at the helipad or the helicopter center, and accusations were then made that she was the victim of rape by Coast Guard officers or agents of the state. And the article was about the ongoing court matter with regards to the case, and the minister decided to address it in a short press conference. And a couple of things came out. It's not necessarily about the case that I'm too concerned about. That is what it is. The minister said that the young lady is not necessarily providing information with regards to the investigations into rape allegations. Leave that up to the police to sort out. But the situation with regards to how she's being treated as a foreign citizen and what it means with regards to our international policies and the potential precedents that these actions set and the signals that they send. Well, therein lies the topic that I want to get into. And for more on this, it's time to cue this.
The article also erroneously suggests, and I don't know, I can't accuse the Express of anything, but the bottom line is this article is fraught with errors, easily to have been corrected had sensible people been contacted. People in the know. As I speak to you members of the media, contrary to what this article is saying, no order has been granted. The matter is under the consideration of the court, far from being finished, waiting on further submissions from Mr. Williams and his law firm. Just simply not true. And further to that, while that application is ongoing and pending, Mr. Williams, for some inexplicable reason, filed a second one. When that one got before the court more recently, the court frowned upon it from what I am told, because I wasn't present, but our lawyers told us. And the court wanted to know from Mr. Williams what is different between the first and the need for the second. As I speak to you, Mr. Williams, not being able to answer those pertinent questions by the court, found wanting legally, as it were, has indicated to the court and shared that with our lawyers that he is withdrawing the second application. Not yet formally withdrawn, but he has notified the court and counsel for us that it will be withdrawn. All that has to be done now is the formality of a notice of discontinuance, which has not yet been done, and therefore for that technical reasons, both these matters are still alive in the court, and for those reasons, I cannot deliberate more closely in and upon them, without running the risk, as I think this article has done, of being in contempt of the court, which wants secrecy around some of the deliberations in this or these matters. Couldn't do it. The article also erroneously stated that there was a court scheduled for today, the 3rd of July, 2023. That, from the information available to me through our lawyers, is simply incorrect. Put differently, untrue. And I can't understand why the Express would allow itself to be taken down that rabbit hole. I can understand Mr. Williams's predicament, not making great progress in the court, because a habeas corpus application is something of an emergency procedure. The first one was filed sometime, I think, on the 2nd of June. And to date, it has not been granted. The second one has been signaled by Mr. Williams and his firm to be withdrawn. So on that basis, on those bases, I'm able to say he's not making very good progress in the court. So he has moved from the courts of law and gone to the court of public opinion by a badong in Chagaramas with a young lady, or with a young lady, whose face was a bit blurred by the Express in the photograph, and a certain Yesenia Gonzalez. And they've gone to the court of public opinion with this horrendously inaccurate article, putting Trinidad and Tobago's international reputation quite loosely at risk when we are fighting to prove to the rest of the world that we are doing all that we can to treat with the human trafficking problem in the world when it touches the borders and the jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago. That is our obligation. And while we are fighting to do that, quite loosely, Mr. Williams and his friends, published by the Express, would do exactly that.
So, the reputation, the international reputation of the country, keep that in mind, because I want to go back to some of the things the minister said earlier. Again, I don't necessarily want to talk about the case itself, because the case itself hasn't necessarily progressed. The court matter, or certain court matters, are ongoing. Ironically, that's the reason why the minister said that he doesn't necessarily want to speak about the case, except he called a press conference to speak about the case. And he said, well, this article is wrong, and they should have asked people in the know, which, again, technically contradicts the whole concept of the minister saying that I should not be speaking about cases that are ongoing. I mean, he even said one of the habeas corpuses were being withdrawn, but because it's still before the court, I'm not supposed to speak about the thing that I'm currently speaking about. So, back to why didn't the reporters, the writers of the Express ask people in the know? Well, as someone in the media, I could say with first-hand experience that more often than not, and it's a lot of the more often, and very, 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 very little of the not. Right? Almost always, people in the know, at least in TNT, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but at least in TNT, people in the know don't want to speak. And the irony is, for better or worse, the public servants, the employees, the people on contract, the people of tenureship, the non-elected officials, they have a tendency to speak even less than the elected ones. And when something controversial comes up, again, more often than not, the elected officials, you can't find them. They scatter. Parliament just, the cabinet of the day just disappears, in the words of the AG. They disappear. Hear nothing about anything except conveniently when they need to defend themselves. And then all of a sudden, there's license to speak about whatever they want to speak about it. Whether there is a directed claim made against them or not. Because sometimes they preempt and talk about a situation, or they talk around a situation, and they give us some information. But the point is, they're talking about it. And I'm not necessarily saying that they should not talk about it. I am the guy that says I would like more people to talk about the important issues of the day, not necessarily to taint or damage a court matter or criminal investigation. I understand that. Not necessarily to reveal anything that is inappropriate for the public. But what I think, what I think is the determination of appropriate for the public is sometimes lost on those in charge. And it's not so much about what's appropriate for the public, but rather what's appropriate for my defense of the situation. And this is not a P&M thing, so before anybody wants to politicize this and make this a partisan issue, right? Because I would like people in the know to speak out where they can. Part of the problem is they're afraid to, and the people in charge are afraid to let them to because they don't want them to misspeak. Some of that is protecting case court matters. Some of that is with regards to, I don't want to expose myself. I don't want to make myself look stupid. So this is what we're left with. So again, Minister, you can't complain. You can't complain because people in the know don't talk to the media. They talk on their timing. They say what they want to say, as in you and your colleagues, and whether it is on your side of the bench or on the other side, right? Politicians control the messaging, and the people who are not elected, who are employees of the public service, are even less likely to speak, at least while they're currently employed, because they have to protect their job, because, yeah, political persecution is a thing. Quickly, I'd just also like to point out that if our international reputation, remember I said don't forget that part, I'll close with this. Our international reputation is at stake because of this one case. Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure this one case, while it might be part of it, I'm sure it is not. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe you could correct me. I don't think correcting me on this point will damage a court matter. But I don't think this one case is the sole basis of the US human trafficking list and us being on tier 2 and us supposed to have been on tier 3, but we basically got a blind. And at tier 3, then the consequences are a bit more, tangible, practical, severe. So we're on the list over what should be a whole series of cases, and we're not on a good spot on the list. And we're on the cusp of going to tier 3, which is when the real bacchanal starts. More importantly, hey, remember I said about that Cybercrime International Treaty that we might want to ratify? Maybe. Might sound like a good idea, right? To be a good participant in the international community. You help me, I help you. Well, there's also that 1951 UN Convention. That, I get it, it was a judge's ruling that directly now causes this situation. However, what we see with regards to how asylum seekers are being treated, on some level, yes, I understand they might not really be asylum seekers, despite what activists say, they might be economic migrants. I get it, but perception, if we read about how we are perceived by the international community, perception matters, right? They're elected politicians too. So you could explain to them all you want, but depending, if the outcry gets big enough, the hot water will be too much for them to bear. They're not gonna cover up things like how we cover up things here for you in those international jurisdictions, in those international media markets. So again, I don't know if we, and our international reputation, could expect for international treaties that we want to benefit from to continue to enjoy that for the benefit of our country when we signed a convention and we kind of ignored it right now. Yes, I don't necessarily think that the government is directly to blame for this situation where we find ourselves with the 1951 Refugee Convention more or less being now ruled to not actually be law locally. I get it, but the legislature could have done something about that since, I don't know, 1951. That's just a guess. I don't know if that's the actual year. I assume it is, because it's in the name. just a minor thing. So maybe between then and now, somebody could have done something about it. No? Well, so if we deport people who claim to be asylum seekers, who the UN might recognize as asylum seekers, because 200, apparently, some of them, if not most of them, on the way to Canada, at least that's what's claimed. Again, perception, we worry about international perception now, 200, potentially some, if not most, if not all, on the way to Canada to seek asylum. They've been arrested for illegal entry, right? I get it. We have to obey the laws. They'll probably be deported back to Venezuela. Internationally, I don't know how well that's going to look with regards to our reputation. Just saying. So, if you want to pick and choose, I don't think the international community will be so accommodating. Maybe they will. We seem to be getting away with a lot between US and China relations in this country. Splitting down the middle, just saying. Anyway, have to take a break. I'm over time. My guest is probably waiting on me. You know, don't want to have him waiting any longer. So when we return, we'll be speaking with the TTPS Media Ambassador about an important and perhaps maybe overlooked, underestimated responsibilities that our society has over the summer break. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen, and we are joined, as usual on Mondays, by the TTPS Media Ambassador, Acting ASP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. It's nice that school's out for the summer, which means that the roads, the traffic is a lot easier. It's a lot clearer. However, this now brings up some concerns, I guess, with regards to how the children's, I don't know, safety or the responsibility for the children's safety is over the vacation.
And the TTPS never has a dull day. We do ever get a break. So even schools get a break, we don't.
Well,
so you see, we just had to keep going and keep going and keep going. and yes, it's congratulations to all those children who were successful in the SA. But now we are back. We are in the vacation period. And just want to reinforce that notwithstanding that we're in the vacation period, we will have a lot of children outside. Children will be going to the malls, children will be going to other venues, some other events, and parents will have to work still.
Mm-hmm.
So the balance is going to be there. How do we keep on balancing this parents work and with the children home? And we always we always have issues where we see that children are home taking care of their siblings, which under the Children Authority, Children Act, it's not the best practice and it's an offense. There are a lot of circumstances.
As an offense, is it once they're a minor, so 17 and under, or?
Right, so there is in the act where we talk about what we call a responsible adult. In the previous act, it was indicated, Marie, just from here, that a 17-year-old in the previous act was not authorized or has the authority to supervise a minor.
Right.
But in the new legislation, the amendments, they call it, where we make reference in this, what we call a responsible adult. So what is a responsible adult? A responsible adult may be considered anybody who has custody, charge, care, or control of that said minor. Anyone.
Right.
So it could be the parents, it could be legal guardian, it could be who the court appoint as the person of authority. Now, here we get a little more, it gets a little more tricky where persons need to understand what we consider a responsible adult. So I'm going to give a simple example. We know that there's an adult in the home, and that adult may be grandparents.
Right.
However, the grandparent may not be medically or physically capable of caring for that child or overseeing that child during the period where the parents leave the child during the day. That grandparent is not considered as a responsible adult, notwithstanding that that grandparent is an adult. Because a responsible adult will be culpable for any offenses incurred by that child during the supervision of that adult. So parents need to understand, or persons need to understand that when you're leaving your child home, make sure that you have a responsible adult and understanding what we consider to be a responsible adult.
But what a 17 or 16-year-old?
Under the Act,
no,
18 years is an adult.
Right.
But if you know you're 18-year-old, even the law caters them to be an adult, is not really mature enough for 18-year-old. Not because they reach 18, they mean they're mature enough to take care of the children, or sorry, their siblings, then don't allow it. Do not allow it. So not because he's 18. We can't take it just because he's 18. Only recently, my colleague from the Child Protection Unit was indicating to us that they would have charged a parent for leaving their 8-year-old child in charge of their 1-year-old. Is that responsible in any context?
I did not. So when you said 8-year-old child, I was expecting, supervised by older child. I did not expect the 8-year-old was the child that was put in the supervisory position.
This is a case that our Child Protection Unit got involved in because it was brought to their attention and they actually had to lay charges. Okay, so it is serious. It is serious to the extent that it is happening.
Right.
But it's not brought to the attention of the police on a general basis.
Because the main thing is, if anything goes wrong, we're talking about any sort of accident, harm, fire, damage to property.
That 8-year-old cannot be held culpable for anything at all.
Right. But well, somebody has to be.
So the parent has to answer the questions now. Why?
Well, so that is with regards to staying home. But with regards to now, because you said this at the start, one of your first things was that, well, there'll be more children out there. You know, usually for 9 months or 8.5 months of the year, children would be in school for certain hours. But for, especially now, we have a 2-month period, more or less, where, and they're not necessarily all going to be stuck at home.
No, so that's where we have other areas now. Every year children go to different type of camps, summer camps as the case may be. And we're just trying to reinforce that parents need to do some due diligence. If you know you're sending your child to a summer camp for the period, do some due diligence. And when I say due diligence, do some inquiries. Who is the person's this camp is? What type of reputation do they have? Visit the camp to see how children are being treated in the camp, because it's your child you are putting there. Right? If there's any issues, anything like that. So, notwithstanding you want to send them to a camp, just drop them by the gate and go about your business and say everything is okay. It's your child. Do some due diligence and inquire.
If the camp utilizes a high number of teenagers under 18,
that may or may not be a red flag, but at the same time, we need to know who is the owner of the camp and what type of...
How many adults.
How many adults in the camp, and whether or not they have proper type of supervision during the period that the children will be there.
So it's the same scenario with regards to whether they're home or not. You have to have trust that a certain amount of responsible adult supervision is wherever your child is.
Exactly.
Because now, you know, then there's also the question of, well, you know, the children's out in the mall.
And there lies something that falls directly into the act.
Because, so I never, at least, no, when I was a child, I was never anymore by myself. But depending, you know, I was trusted enough that, okay, mom's in the bank, mom does not want to take me to the bank because I will be miserable and whatever. But I'm old enough, well, I could go to the toy store. Or I could
Good.
Go, right?
So then you may,
Or go to the bookstore.
We go with
to kind of entertain myself and stay out of trouble.
Just say we go to friends to the mall.
Right.
And all your friends are under the age of 18. Who is a responsible adult, may I ask? There's a question everybody needs to find out.
Right, because the flip side is you might get a group of teenagers, 15 to 17, that are at the mall.
This is where the law enforcement will be paying attention at these various locations. And under the Act, the Children Act 4601, Part 7 speaks to offenses relating to dangerous drugs, tobacco, and alcohol. You know children and I would say, quote unquote, persons who border in from 15, 16, 17 up to 18 wants to experiment.
Yep.
Right? And the opportunity to experiment will be there in the absence of some parents.
Yep.
Right, or some other adult. So these are also parts we have to be very careful with.
I hate to say this, but in the presence of adults, I think around 16, 17, it might start.
No, so I'm saying it's going twofold. So I'm dealing with the fact that the parents may not know.
Right.
And then there are other aspects of where parents are fully well and offer, which in both situations under the Children Act, it's an offense. So we have to be very careful of what we are accustomed doing and believing it's okay because I give my child alcohol and it's all right because it's home. But the Act says no. The Act says, and it's a person who, and if I read section, so 35, 36, 37, and 38 gives some guidelines. So the first one is, person who exposes a child or causes a child to be exposed to a dangerous drug or a substance having an effect similar to that of a dangerous drug commits an offense and is liable to, on summary conviction, a fine of $5,000 and to imprisonment for 9 months, or in conviction indictment, 5 years. So now we have the issue where marijuana is decriminalized,
right,
but it's still a dangerous drug. Understanding how serious it is,
yeah,
the Children Act say that's an offense.
I mean,
the dilemma is there.
There's also the fact that there are fetes and parties that allow younger people.
And I haven't gone to that as
right.
yet.
That's how I know, right? Well, yeah, that's how I know that is at least happening currently. But I guess this is one of those things where perhaps, because I don't know, in my time, I'm amazed at the amount of not liberties that I got with regards to partying and stuff like that, but just minor things like, okay, we're out or I'm home by myself for a few minutes, I'm not gonna burn the house down,
exactly.
Right? But I do wonder now if it's just something that parents need to be formally taught, because this does not, I don't think this is something that parents are going to necessarily, I mean, obviously if your child somehow puts the stove on and burns down the house, you can't expect somebody else to pay for that for you.
Exactly.
But there could be other situations now where parents might not fully realize, well, hold on, you know, I'm liable.
Because you see, society, in our current society, we do not have the extended homes anymore, right? And in areas where we have extended homes, we don't have that level of responsible adult, quote unquote, because before we had a lot of different persons, even siblings who were 1 year older than you, were much more responsible in my generation than now.
Yeah, right? I was actually now thinking that it seems to me as though, at least not necessarily all children, but there was a bit more responsibility, and maybe it was like naivety and not wanting to break rules and scared of authority, but there was something there that potentially kept children from going too far.
So what I want to advise the public and parents, get a Quora with the Children's Act, right, 4601, and understand your roles and responsibility in accordance to the Act. Allow the child to read the Act, certain sections of the Act, which is much more important, and things that we sometimes we bypass, right? Especially Section 7, we talk about alcohol, tobacco, and dangerous drugs and all those things. I think we need to bring it to their attention, because these are things that they normally would experiment with very early.
I do also wonder if this is tied in some way with regards to when they have missing teenagers and missing children who are not necessarily, like, they went missing on their own. I'm not saying all cases are like that, but I actually experienced with regards to one of the organizations I did work with, where 2 teenagers, they went off on their own. Right, they took advantage of a situation, slipped past supervision and went missing for a day or two. And I do wonder if part of that is now we don't necessarily as a society understand our responsibilities and how serious it could be, kind of take it for granted, and then when things happen, then we want to hold our head and bowl and say, how could this happen?
So true.
Well, folks, we have to break for news on the hour, and when we return, the SP will be here to take your phone calls. Hopefully we have both lines working again. Fingers crossed. Yes, we still have it, I've been told. So stay tuned. News on the hour next. We'll be right back.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Dr. Brinsley Samaru has died. UNC activist Brian Stone has passed away. 18 arrested, firearms, ammunition and drugs seized. And internationally, BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for sexually explicit photographs. Now for the details. Professor Emeritus at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Brinsley Samaru was hospitalized 3 days ago. Professor Brinsley was a Member of Parliament for River and a Minister in the Government of National Alliance for Reconstruction. Dr. Samaru was being assessed at a private hospital, where he was taken on Sunday after suffering a brain aneurysm. United National Congress activist Brian Stone has died. According to a release issued by the UNC Pro, Stone collapsed and died of suspected heart failure while playing table tennis at the Queen's Park Oval yesterday. Following the news of his passing, several members of the UNC sent condolences to his family. Police officers have arrested 18 persons, seized several quantities of drugs and illegal firearms and ammunition during anti-crime exercises conducted within the last 24 hours across various policing divisions. Between the hours of 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Saturday in the Morva district, Northeastern Division officers executed search warrants at several homes but found nothing mentioned in the warrants. A search was, however, conducted in an open grassy area along Pitch Road, Morvat, and officers found 4 plastic-wrapped packages containing marijuana. The drugs weighed 253 grams. Officers also arrested a 41-year-old man of Lavant Hill Extension Road, Navadati, Morva, for inquiries of a larceny motor vehicle which occurred on June 30th in the area. Internationally, BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for sexually explicit photographs has been suspended. The corporation says it is working as quickly as possible to establish the facts into the allegations concerning the as-yet unnamed male presenter. In an email to staff on Sunday, the BBC's Director General said he was taking the allegations incredibly seriously. Tim Davies said the situation was complex and that the corporation has been in contact with external authorities. The Metropolitan Police says it received initial contact from the BBC, but no formal referral or allegation has been made. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day.
They have this burning desire to ask the question, and they're just not asking it.
My youngest daughter had an incident, not really an incident, but a concern at school one time where she said, "Mommy, I don't want you to pick me up anymore." And I said, "Why?" She's like, "Because the kids keep asking me, what happened to your mommy's skin? And every day I go to school, they're like, what happened to your mommy's skin?" And I went to the car and I cried.
What studies have shown is that in general, stress, and that is metabolic as well as physiological stress on the body, can lead to the onset and worsening of autoimmune disorders.
I know how cruel the world could be when they see me. Would I be deemed worthy? Would they allow me into the spaces that I wanted to be?
It's harder when no one is clapping, but clap a little louder for yourself during those times. Anything is possible if you have the mindset and the desire to do it.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Welcome back to Talking Point, folks, on this Monday morning, start of the week. Beautiful start to the week. Hopefully it stays relatively calm, relatively safe, and all of you who are enjoying your summer vacation, the start of it, hopefully you're enjoying yourselves. Now, I forgot to mention at the top of the show, my co-host, he's recovering from illness. At least, I hope he's at the recovery stage. He was under the weather over the weekend. So that is why Keaton wasn't able to join me today. And hopefully he will be able to join me tomorrow. But that being said, now is the time that the phone lines are going to be open, where you could speak about anything that I spoke about. And there were quite a few stories. I couldn't touch on everything that I wanted to speak about. I tried to put as much into the show as possible with regards to news that came out over the weekend. So I spoke about quite a few things. I spoke about with regards to refugee status and that story is still ongoing, our international reputation. The fact that, hey, Minister, people who any know, they don't talk, maybe you don't even let them to talk. And also about the fact with regards to WASA, the water disruption, etc., etc. There might be some crime stories you might want to ask the ASP. He is still here with me. Or you might want to speak about the elections. But the ASP is here to take your questions with regards to the ongoing situation. And perhaps maybe you have some stories with regards to observations on, well, let's just say irresponsible guidance and certain life-changing moments in a young person's life.
So true.
Or thresholds.
Yeah, I mean,
you know. I mean, your first drink is a threshold, right?
We were all there at some point in time.
I can't.
Some people like to still believe they're still there at the age of 18. They still want to be.
Yeah,
there.
some people want to. No. I think the real thing is some fellas still think they're bachelors in the early 20s
they're still
when
there.
they're still in their 50s.
Yeah, they still feel it there.
Well. I mean, hey, forever young, right? We have a call on the line from Maruga. Good morning. Morning, caller. You on the air?
Yeah, morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Glad the police on there because I real fed up with this crime situation. I want to know if they do have no undercover police. People going in the bank, they robbing them. They coming in your house, they robbing you. And police cannot set up a sting operation.
Caller?
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that your question for the ASP?
No, and then look, if you're going the tongue and you have gold on your neck, they're robbing you. They can't have undercover police putting on jewels and have a set of them there to hold these people. They have no consequence for bad behavior in Trinidad anymore. So,
Dallas Day TV caller, keep going. All right. Yeah, we might have lost the caller there because I was actually hearing the Steve in the background. I'm not hearing it anymore. But I don't know if you could even answer that question. I mean, on a basic level,
it is a concern for a lot of citizens, and I'm hearing the tone of the caller and understanding the frustration that he's going through. We all are frustrated with the level of crime and the type of crimes that we're having. All right. It's difficult to grapple with some of the type of crimes that we are having. Mm-hmm. Majority of the crimes are crimes of opportunity. And once opportunity exists, those criminal elements are there. It takes much more than just the police doing undercover. There's a whole set of other things that has to be put in place that is not our forum here to discuss on that. Right? But we understand. We understand, and we know that what the frustration that they have, and we are putting something. We are ensuring that we have a lot of presence outside there in different areas. We can't be at all the locations that we're looking at because there's opportunities.
So we have a caller from St. James. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, morning.
Morning, and morning. Keaton, get well soon. Don't drink milk. Drink a lot of citrus, although, like, you had to go buy them certain stores now to get orange citrus since Caroni closed down. It's so sad. You used to get oranges all over the place, anywhere, every corner. You can't get, and it's the price of orange now, my God. Anyway, I've called to talk about the youths and, well, so they're smoking and they're drinking, they're doing everything. And long time, in my time, my young days, when I watched the adults and my father, and so they used to drink the average regular rum. And when people reach old, when men get old, you see them in 60s and the 70s, you know, they're so immune to the regular alcohol, they used to turn to punching. Because I think it's about 45% in the regular rums, and the punching, I think, is about 70%, if I'm not mistaken. But now, They call in punching the truth. And that is what the youths and them drinking. So I don't know if at a young age, so you drinking that time in the next 20 years, if you continue drinking, well, they have to drink airplane fuel or some kind of thing because, you know, if the liver burn out by that time, because, you know, the constant drinking does damage your liver, burn your liver, and you don't live long. You know, it's terrible. But they're drinking a lot of alcohol. And officer, I wanted to ask you something. If you go out to play and you come home 7 o'clock in the night, long time when you was a youth going to school, how your parents would react to that? Right? I wanted to know, or if they talk to you several times, you pelt a stone and break the glass, you back chat your parents. I wanted to give us just a couple of examples of what is happening, and also the thing about the marijuana being you could have a certain amount in your possession as an adult, and so where these people getting the marijuana from, because you know normally they would regularize in other countries and they would have farms and you would have stores that selling the product and the state would benefit from it in some way. So where are these people who are required to have a certain amount in their possession, where are they getting it from? I'll listen off here. You all have a good day.
We have a caller.
Yeah.
So we'll take the caller and then the ASP will answer. Caller from Tobago, good morning. Caller, you on the air?
Hello?
Hi, you're on the air, caller. Don't listen to the TV. Listen to the phone, you're on the air.
Yeah, but not. I was trying to get this program, WESN. Wasn't this program? With
Yes, you're on talking point. There's a delay, so.
Yeah, but I think this is a different program. You all have 2 programs or something?
Nope, there's a delay, caller. Listen to your phone, there's a delay, so you're not going to hear yourself on the TV yet.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Yeah. I wanna take us back to the caller before this one. Alright? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the caller before this one was speaking about the undercover cops. Am I on track?
Yes, go ahead.
Right. And the officer is actually evading that idea of undercover cops. Or, well, I remember back in my days of growing up, policemen would be in ragamuffin style and hanging out around the crowd, you know, hanging out in the town. And there's no way that crime could ever get at ease without undercover cops. You need people who can be out there as normal and regular people in the whole hat and all kind of thing, you know, to be able to catch up with perpetrators, you know. So I can't understand how this officer actually dismissed that idea. You know, we need that. If we don't have that right now, waste of time. Unmarked vehicles and that kind of thing. Very heavily tinted vehicles with police officers in there. He's saying that you can't have an officer in every area. But like 2 officers here, 2 officers there. They're not side by side. One just 2 minutes away from each other and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that the officer played that down as, nah, you can't have people everywhere. Yes, you can't have people everywhere, but you can give it a try. They are nothing like undercover cops these days, I find, except they're looking for a particular, you know, some particular person. But we're talking here now about these petty thieves, these petty snatch purse and that kind of thing, type of
Okay, caller.
Robbers, you know?
Yeah, all right. We're gonna have to end the call unless you have anything else to say. Okay, right. I'll just say this. I listened to what the ASP said, and I don't believe that's what exactly he was saying. Part of the problem is, at least with regards to the police, this is where now those in the know cannot necessarily say everything that they could say because they can't reveal ongoing police operations. But the officer, ASP Ashraf Ali, did not state that they don't do undercover work. He was just cautioning the previous caller that it's not only about undercover work or not having undercover cops that is, you know, the deficiency. Building a case is going to need more than that. Just look at what's going on in the States where, you know, you can arrest whoever you want to arrest, but if they're not prosecuted, if they're not convicted, you know, and end up back in the streets, then it more or less don't matter, right? So there's more to it than that, and the ASP cannot speak to the more on that.
And it's not just that alone. I understand where the caller from Tobago is coming from, right? The mere fact that the word undercover means that it's not known to anybody, known to the public.
That's the other, yes, I was thinking that,
So
yes.
we do have CID officers we consider to be plainclothes officers who actually does a level of overt operations. So you know they are CID officers, but they're in plainclothes. Undercover officers is totally different in the context we're talking about. Whoever is undercover, and if you're doing any undercover operations, the general public would not know that those persons are undercover. So we need to be very, we need to kind of use this as a distinction of undercover and what we have plainclothes officers.
One thing to notice, you see a lot of undercover cops on police shows. You don't necessarily hear about undercover police officers in foreign news. Think about it. Think about it. We have a caller, I can't remember, where's the caller from? From Faizabad. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, officer. Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Morning.
Good morning, sir.
Officer, my heart reached out to you based on the effort that you and your men are making. But clearly, the leadership of the police service, in my humble opinion, lack vision and foresight to take the fight to the criminals. I must say that when Mr. Griffith was there was a major impact on that his administration. And it's sad to see we are where we are today, you know. But you are not alone in the fight, officer, because public utilities in a mess, healthcare in a mess. So don't feel ashamed, but I wish you all the best in your efforts. Another thing I would like to touch on is the marijuana, sir. I'm seeing people smoking marijuana on the streets freely. And I've never heard or seen anything with them being called before the court. And you would agree with me that there is some degree of lawlessness as far as that goes, or lack of implementation of the law. I don't know which way you want to see it, but I think something needs to be done with respect to that, sir, in my humble opinion.
All right, thank you, caller. We'll get to that after this next caller from Shogunas. Good morning.
Good morning, John.
Morning, morning.
Sir.
Again, it's time to spit in the wind. We're talking about law and order and the crime, and I have given the reason for this on a number of occasions. It is a breakdown in law and order. Unless we enforce all our laws, we are here. We make no attempt to do that, and we keep on plastering sores. As regards the gangs, I have shown how it comes up, what is generating it. Is the politicians in East Dry River, on Marabella on the train line, and the train line in Shogunas to Kunupia, and nothing, absolutely nothing is doing but that. We prefer to talk every week, have me calling every now and then, repeating it, and do nothing about it. And the whole basis of this, I keep saying, is the administrative report, where people are supposed to document the progress, what the problems they have, and they're supposed to be on the parliamentary website where everybody could see it, and nobody is doing it. Any questions, gentlemen, or you prefer to keep your jobs and have something to talk about?
I keep my job regardless of what I say, unfortunately for the public servant. It's not so simple.
I cannot.
But
thank you.
I was a public servant. The easiest man to fire is a public servant.
So true.
Because all his duties are spelled out in the public service regulation. And there is a procedure to deal with it, which is not enforced because the politicians who are supposed to put oversight do not do their job.
All right. Thank you, Professor. I actually agree with your points, and I will explain why I agree with it. Well, I will just say the professor said things that the ASP cannot say. And I'm not even saying that he wants to say them.
But the thing about it,
right?
The professor this morning was point on. Honestly speaking, the professor is absolutely 100% correct this morning. The challenge you continue to face is that when you speak out of the challenges, persons of the opinion is excuses you are making, but it's the reality of what is facing, right? He mentioned some of the areas in question, and then there's a lot of things that we had to look at. Enforcement of the laws.
Yeah. Or just enforcement of the rules. If you start off not enforcing your internal rules as a ministry, then the regulations aren't followed. Then the laws, say for like town and country planning or for public utilities or what have you.
So one of the caller addressed the issue of enforcement of the laws as well as the marijuana.
Yes.
Let's be brutally honest this morning, right? There's nothing else that we can hide about it. The legislation is here, they decriminalize the use of marijuana.
Right.
30 grams or less, it's a ticketable offense. However, there is case law that you cannot issue a ticket to an individual. You cannot arrest somebody for a ticketable offense. They must be given the opportunity to pay a ticket. Up to this date, we don't have ticket books for the marijuana. It's not the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service fault. I don't know where it lies, but police officers cannot issue a ticket for 30 grams or less. 30 grams to 60 grams, which is ticketable. Possession of 30 grams is legal.
Yeah.
Smoking in a public space, using smoking marijuana is also ticket.
Right, you can't arrest, you have to give a ticket. If you don't have the resources to give a ticket, literally.
We cannot give a ticket because we have case laws stating that we can't. That is why under the fixed penalty system, if you stop an individual for a traffic offense under the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act and it's a ticket, he must be ticketed. You cannot proceed by summons.
And just to point out, folks, we're talking about not having the paperwork apparatus to enforce those. Not about the guns or the night vision goggles or the wiretapping equipment.
So when you go to the grocery and you see those seasoning, different type of seasoning, you must watch on it and read what 30 grams look like.
Right.
That gives you understanding what 30 grams. So that amount of marijuana,
that's it,
is legally
you could have in your possession.
You could have in your possession. And that quantity.
We have a caller on the line from San Fernando. Morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean. Morning, ESP.
Morning,
sir. And Sean, that you see just what the ESP explained about the tickets, being able to ticket for those offences, and they can't. Those are the deliberate. How would I put it? Those are things that are, in my opinion, that are deliberate by this particular government. I have said already to you, Sean, on this program, but this government of Trinidad, this present government, has done an injustice to the nation, and especially the youth, by decriminalizing marijuana. It is, if you look at what the ESP is saying there's a lot more. Tell me if I'm wrong here. So you all have a lot more marijuana seizures and imported marijuana, for that matter of fact, because there is what they did by decriminalizing marijuana. They opened up another industry, or opened up that industry, I should say, that illegal industry, and we need to act up and ask them to repeal it, because this. I am telling you, I am seeing the effects of this on youth. And according to that other gentleman from Pfizer, I think it is, Sean, in South here, you now seeing people smoking marijuana on the streets, which is illegal. smoking marijuana on the street.
I've noticed more marijuana smoke in places where I don't think it's supposed to be.
And let me say this last thing. This is because we have a lawless nation. This is a lawless country, you know. You give them an inch, they want to take 10 miles. They're still speeding on the highway and doing all those things. Thank you all, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. So that's the last call. That's the last call. I don't know if you want to respond to that. I have a few things to say.
Well, let me put it this way. The question always been asked, how do we get from decriminalization to 60 grams, which is a ticketable offense, under 30 grams, decriminalized. So legally, you could have it in your possession. But marijuana is still illegal.
Yeah, because the caller asked, where does the supply come from?
Exactly. So where does it? So you have an illegal source that becomes decriminalized.
Magic.
From 30 grams.
Yeah.
So when you look at so many of those persons on the streets, everybody who wants to smoke marijuana, who wants to experience with marijuana, have 30 grams on them. 30 grams in several different packets. So different 30 grams. And every time they go all out, so persons are now trafficking in marijuana on the streets, 30 grams. So they legally, because they sit down and traffic in marijuana, 30 grams.
Right.
How does the police treat with that? The police cannot treat with that because anytime you arrest detain somebody or who has 30 grams in their possession, they're legal.
Yeah, they can be declared, it's theirs.
If you have over 30 grams, it's a ticket. We cannot issue a ticket because we have no ticket book. So technically, you can have up to 60 grams with you, and we cannot do anything.
And before anybody says that the ASB has revealed secrets, I'm pretty sure the criminals are aware of this by now.
They are fully aware.
Because they would have gone through the process and experienced the relief.
They have manipulated the process because every time we go to some different locations, 30 grams, they're showing you they have the 30 grams. They're telling you this is my 30 grams.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're declaring their 30 grams in their possession.
Yeah. The ones that know the law the best.
They know 30 grams. You all would see individuals who went and purchased those small scales. They're making sure they're within the legal limit of 30 grams, but they're still hustling on the streets with it. They're still selling, but they always have 30 grams.
Now,
so they can manipulate the system and beat the system. Because why?
We have put a major loophole with regards to drugs, well, marijuana in the country. I'll say this. I actually, just out of context, I am all for decriminalization, right? It takes the user, particularly the casual user, out of the equation. Police, so you want to be running down some casual, or I just happen to be smoke once every couple of months, and that's a bit of a waste of time, right? Now, dealers, heavy users maybe even, but how do you legislate heavy use now? But I get it though. I get what you said, San Fernando, and I think now that I've listened to you again, I have to admit, I think you might be right. I think our society is not ready because we cannot treat with this newfound freedom, right, maturely, responsibly enough.
And then, you remember the other caller talk about our children now, and for the purpose of our children, and even young adults, so young adults and our children, because sometimes actually I reach 18 is still not mature enough to be considered legally. Legally is 18, but physically it's not mature enough. We have youths, young adults and youths, who are now openly experimenting with marijuana, various types of alcohols combined together with other pills, right? I mean, long ago was you're drinking rum and straight up to puncheon. Now it is puncheon mixed with other energy drinks. So there's a lot of combination and mixing and experimenting that is caused.
I don't know if long ago it was, I don't know, young people back in my day with puncheon, I just thought it was bears.
No, there was a specific. Now the combination, so it is much more difficult, but parents need to understand, and getting back to my focus this morning was to ensure that parents and responsible adults understand the veracity and the extent to which we have to take care of our children and be responsible for them, right? It is not just about the child in the home anymore. It's about what the child may be doing in the home, simple things that restricting access to your internet. They may go on porn sites. We don't know, right? They may communicate with other persons, sharing certain things with them. So it is no longer, when we were young, in our young generation, it's about a magazine. Right? It's not about a magazine anymore. Social media has now expanded this whole thing. So we have to be very careful now and understand the extent of it. So the level of supervision and the level of responsibility that a parent, or in the context we're talking about, the responsible adult needs to understand the exposures that we put our children to.
And social media has also given outsiders access to your home.
So true.
So a minor that would have been within your four walls now is potentially, you know, some adult with bad intentions now has access, no matter how obscure that pathway may be. And therein is what I want to leave you all with. There's a lot of things now in our society that we did not have back in 1994, 1984, 1974. And now they're here. Internet, decriminalization of marijuana, etc., etc., etc. Are we as a society able to treat with these newfound freedoms? And since we can't deal with the responsibilities that technically was already in books then, I don't think it's surprising that we're having issues dealing with these newfound freedoms and newfound responsibilities when basic crimes is already getting out of control. But beyond that, as the professor always says, it's about enforcing our law and order, all of our laws, even the little ones, that society almost demands to be ignored. Well, what are we going to do about that? I'll leave you with that question here. It's still a good day, however, to have a good day, as my co-host always says, so make it a great one for yourselves. Enjoy those on vacation. And for those of us who are still working, enjoy the ease up on the traffic while it lasts. I do so love vacations, maybe even more now than when I was in school. We will see you folks tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN